Welcome back to the Deep Dive View. This time, we're digging into a document you shared titled 013 Keys to Communication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, usually when we think about connecting long distance, we think physical barriers, right? Time zones, travel.
Yeah. Getting there.
But this material really shifts the focus. It argues the bigger challenge often is, well, cultural difference. Those invisible walls.
That's so true. It's easy to think, okay, I sent the email or I said the words and assume the message, arrived intact, like shipping a package.
Right.
But Robert Park's point mentioned here is crucial. Transcoding words is one thing. Their interpretation, that's entirely different. It's all tied up in the listener's context, their history, their whole way of seeing things.
Yeah, it's not just about having good intentions.
Not at all.
That example in the document, the African chief and the plow, that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
His immediate reaction, it's worth 10 wives. It just screams how different value systems can be.
Absolutely. It makes you realize how hard it must be to communicate something.
Yeah.
Intangible, like faith, when its value doesn't fit neatly into their existing framework.
It's like, how many assumptions are we carrying that we don't even notice?
Mm-hmm. And that's really the heart of what we want to unpack here. How do we bridge those gaps effectively?
Yeah.
Now, the document focuses a lot on missionary work, obviously. But these principles, honestly, they're relevant for anyone interacting across cultures, business, education, even just, diverse communities.
So our mission for this deep dive is to pull out those key strategies, how to actually connect.
Exactly. Let's get into it.
Okay, so first off, the formidable cultural barrier. The document hammers this home technology, shrinks the globe, sure, but culture, that's the real hurdle now.
It really is. Sending the message is easy. Knowing it landed right, that's the trick.
And culture itself is, well, it's huge, isn't it? Not just food and clothes.
Oh, way broader. Kluckown's definition nails it. The group's shared ways of thinking, feeling, believing, all that stored knowledge. Or Liz Peck, culture as a whole, designed for living. How a group adapts to everything. Physical world, social structures, even their core beliefs, their ideational environment. It's complex stuff.
And you see that complexity hit hard, apparently, with people going into these situations, like missionaries. The document mentions this initial shock.
Yeah, they might have studied the language for years, traveled miles.
Right, put in all the effort.
And still feel like they're hitting an invisible wall.
Yeah.
The words are right, maybe, but the understanding just isn't there.
So the instinct might be to focus just on getting the message out.
Exactly. But the key insight here is, before you speak, you have to listen. You have to study the audience, understand their world. Be a student first.
Which brings us to this 3-culture model from Eugene Nida. That seems pretty central.
It's a very helpful framework. Nida says there are always 3 cultures interacting. First, you have the Bible culture.
Meaning?
The original setting.
Right.
Judah when Ezra was writing. Or the Roman Empire during Paul's journeys. The historical cultural context where the message originated.
And the messenger today isn't the original source.
Exactly. There's a secondary messenger. And the document stresses the need for faithfulness to that original message. It quotes 1 John, 2 Timothy, Revelation.
Those warnings about not adding or subtracting.
Precisely. Handle the original message with care. That's job 1 regarding the Bible culture sound interpretation.
Okay, so Bible culture is number 1. What are the other 2?
Number 2 is the missionaries' culture, or, the communicators' culture. Their own upbringing, language, worldview, values the filter they see everything through.
Right, their own glasses.
And third is the respondent culture, the audience. They have their own sources, their own messages, their own way of understanding.
And the goal with them is?
Well, first, understanding them. Then, hopefully, belief in the message. But also, crucially, developing communicators from within that culture. Like Paul tells Timothy, entrusting the message to faithful people who can teach others too.
So it's not just a one-way street, it's this interplay.
Totally. The communicator has to cross cultural distance in 2 directions. First, back to understand the Bible culture accurately.
Using good hermeneutics. Right. Context, language.
Yes, rigorous study. Not just reading your own ideas into it. Avoid projecting your own culture onto the text.
Like those examples given the locusts and the cup.
Perfect examples. We picture John the Baptist eating grasshoppers because, well, locusts makes us think of insects.
But it could have been locust bean pods.
Right. Or assuming drinky all of it at the Last Supper meant individual cups, just because that's our custom. It shows how easily we overlay our own norms.
Okay, so step 1. Understand the original context carefully. What's next?
Step 2 is crucial. Encoding the message for the respondent culture. After you've done the hard work of figuring out what the Bible meant then, you have to translate it not just words, but concepts into a form that makes sense now to them.
And consciously try not to filter it too much through your own cultural lens.
Exactly. Minimize your own cultural static.
The examples here are really striking. Revelation 3.20, Jesus knocking.
Yeah, in Zenaki culture, knocking apparently meant you were a thief. So it had to be translated as a calling.
Wow. Or Mark 12.40, devouring widows' houses.
In some parts of Mexico, that could be taken literally like animals eating the structure. So it needed reframing, maybe as destroying their livelihood.
It just shows that word for word isn't always the answer. It can even be misleading.
Definitely. You have to think about reception, interpretation based on their norms.
And the ultimate aim, the document argues, isn't just getting individuals to believe, right? It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. The long-term goal is fostering indigenous leaders, people from within the culture who can communicate the message effectively in their own context.
Because they'll just intuitively get it better.
Right. The document points out this frustration. Sometimes national pastors end up preaching very Western sermons, even to their own people, because their training was so Westernized.
That makes sense.
And there's another related point. Sometimes the initial messengers get so focused on their target group, they neglect to communicate the message's relevance for other cultures to the new believers.
Which could limit the church's own outreach vision later on.
Potentially, yeah. It underlines how complex this whole process is.
Which leads nicely into Hesselgrave's 7 dimensions. These sound like key areas to understand.
They are. Hesselgrave gives us a really practical checklist almost. 7 areas where culture heavily impacts communication. First up, worldviews.
The basic assumptions about reality.
Exactly. How people perceive the world, their place in it. Everyone's got these tinted glasses, Hesselgrave says. You need to know the prescription of the audience's glasses to encode effectively.
Okay, what's second?
Cognitive processes. How people think, how they reason, how they learn.
So, not what they believe, but the way they process information.
Precisely. Is truth found through subjective experience? Objective logic.
Yeah.
Revelation. It differs. Think of, say, a traditional Hindu approach versus a Western scientific one. Different paths to knowing.
Got it. Third.
Linguistic forms. Language itself. It's not just vocabulary, grammar, structure, what gets emphasized. It all reflects cultural priorities.
Like how some languages focus heavily on time, others less so.
Exactly. Language is a deep window into the culture. Fourth is behavioral patterns.
How people act, customs, etiquette.
The do's and don'ts.
Hmm.
Greetings, gifts, personal space. Get these wrong, and you could be that ugly American even with the best intentions. It builds or breaks rapport.
That makes sense. Number 5.
Social structures. How society is organized. Roles, hierarchies, relationships. Who talks to whom? About what? When?
Like Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman crossing social lines.
Perfect example. You need that societal map, as Hesselgrave calls it, to know the proper channels.
Okay. 6th.
Media influence. How is information shared? Oral tradition, written word, digital. Media aren't neutral. They shape the message. Introducing literacy changes everything.
Right. It impacts how knowledge is valued and transmitted.
Definitely. And finally, 7th, motivational resources. What makes people tick? What drives decisions?
Different cultures value different things, so they're motivated differently.
You got it. Individual achievement versus group harmony, for instance. Confucian philosophy might motivate different choices than, say, Western individualism.
Wow. Okay, those 7 dimensions cover a lot of ground.
They really do. And Hesselgrave expands on that worldview idea with the worldview glasses metaphor.
Acquired through growing up in a culture.
Exactly, through enculturation. These glasses shape how we see everything. God, humanity, nature, time, values. The Hindu example in the text shows just how different those views can be.
And the point is, we often don't even realize we're wailing them.
Right. And they're incredibly hard to just take off. Even accepting new ideas doesn't automatically change the fundamental lens. You need, the text suggests, a Christian worldview to truly see things in a Christian way.
Which connects to this idea of contextualization and the contrast between, say, typical Western Bible teaching and what Weber did in Indonesia.
Yeah, the document contrasts topical teaching focusing on isolated doctrines with Weber's more narrative approach in Luwak Banggai.
He worked with mostly non-literate people.
Right, and he found that just teaching abstract concepts didn't connect well. He shifted to telling the story creation to Christ to kingdom, a holistic picture.
And even then, the initial responses varied quite a bit.
They did. Some genuine conversions, but also some that seemed more about social belonging or mixing old and new beliefs. It really highlighted the need to ensure the message was landing within their framework.
And Weber had this breakthrough realization about how they communicated, right?
He did. He noticed that while he spoke their language, his style was still very abstract, very literate. They communicated differently, using vivid descriptions, stories, shared experiences, painting pictures with words.
So he had to adapt his style.
Totally. He started using drawings, drama, storytelling methods that resonated with their oral culture. The big takeaway is adapting how you communicate to match the audience.
He learned their communication to share his message.
Exactly. And from that, the document outlines some principles for helping people put on those Christian worldview glasses.
Okay, what are they?
First, don't start with isolated bits. Tell the big story, the overarching narrative, using key passages. Second, respect the Bible's own progressive revelation. God unfolded things over time, doctrine tied to life and history. Big picture first, then details. Build on foundations.
Provide the whole framework, not just pieces.
Right. And third, carefully compare and contrast biblical truth with their existing myths and beliefs, not dismissively but sensitively, helping reshape the underlying framework, helping them find meaning in life's struggles within this new narrative.
Okay, that makes sense. Which leads into Hasselgrave's 4 elements of contextualization: definition, selection, adaptation, application. Let's start with definition. Why is that so vital?
Because words can be tricky, especially spiritual terms. God, sin, prayer, Savior. These can mean vastly different things depending on someone's background.
Like Jeffrey Bull's experience with Tibetan Buddhists.
Exactly. He found the words he used were understood through a Buddhist lens, carrying completely different meanings. You can't assume shared understanding. You have to define your terms.
Make sure you're using the same dictionary, basically.
Pretty much. Compare and contrast the biblical meaning with the cultural understanding. Otherwise, you might build faith on a foundation of misunderstanding.
Okay, then selection. You can't teach everything at once.
Nope. Even Jesus taught progressively. Selection is about choosing the most crucial, foundational truths first, tailoring the starting point.
Like emphasizing Christ's power to a polytheist or his virtue to a Confucianist.
Right. Start where they are. Find the most relevant entry point for their worldview.
Got it. Third is adaptation.
This is about adjusting the presentation to address specific cultural questions or gaps in their existing beliefs.
So maybe focusing on selfishness rather than lying, if lying isn't seen the same way.
Could be. Or addressing the afterlife in Confucianism, or the desire for a peaceful death in Buddhism versus Christ's cry on the cross. It's looking for those special entries, points where the gospel speaks directly to their context.
Finding the cultural hooks.
And fourth is application, making it personal.
The thou art the man moment.
Exactly. Moving from abstract truth to personal relevance. The Holy Spirit does the convicting, yes, but the messenger needs to present it intelligently and appropriately.
Like that Tibetan governor Bull mentioned, he saw the logical contradiction in his beliefs about reincarnation, but it didn't move him personally.
Right. Intellectual assent isn't enough. It needs personal application, balanced with love, inviting a response of faith.
And all this content approach is affected by style, too.
Absolutely. Style is the personal imprint, how the message is delivered. Is it correct, clear? But also, is it appropriate for that culture?
A style mismatch can be a barrier.
Definitely. The example given was Western communication in Japan, sometimes feeling too blunt, lacking awe or reverence. The style needs to fit the message and the culture, conveying God's greatness and beauty appropriately.
An awkward style can undermine the message itself.
It really can.
Okay, the final big idea here comes from Don Richardson. Finding the keys, these redemptive analogies. This sounds fascinating.
It's a powerful concept. Richardson suggests God often prepares cultures for the gospel by weaving in concepts or practices that foreshadow or resonate with biblical truth.
Like echoes of the gospel already present.
Kind of, yeah. Think biblical examples.
Yeah.
The Passover lamb, the bronze serpent, manna, all pointing towards Jesus. The writer to the Hebrews did this masterfully for his Jewish audience, showing Christ as the fulfillment of their history and rituals.
So the task is to discern these analogies within any culture.
Exactly, and the benefit is huge. When people see the gospel fulfilling something within their own heritage, it connects deeply. It's not entirely foreign. It illuminates what was already there. Helps them share authentically too.
The document lists some amazing examples. The Damahai, the Danina Blancablan, the Karen legend.
Yeah, the Azmat peace ritual, the Yali Osua, These concepts were deeply ingrained. Presenting the gospel as the fulfillment makes it feel like the answer they were already seeking.
And it helps preserve their identity, avoids apathy.
Right, it connects rather than replaces entirely.
This connects to Richardson's other idea, finding the eye-opener. What's that about?
The eye-opener is that crucial first step. The initial point of contact that helps someone see a contrast, sparks interest, creates an opening for the gospel message.
Like getting to first base in baseball, you need that starting point.
Exactly. It establishes that beachhead of understanding or need.
He uses Jesus and the Samaritan woman as a prime example.
Yes. Something familiar, important to her community, becomes the eye-opener. Jesus uses it to talk about living water, creating spiritual thirst. Then he addresses her personal life, her sin.
It's a step-by-step connection, starting positively.
Respectful, engaging, loving the person, addressing the issue. But the eye-opener is just the start, Richardson stresses. It has to lead somewhere ultimately to conversion, touching home plate.
And Paul in Athens, the altar to an unknown God.
Same principle. Paul didn't start by attacking their idols. He found something familiar at this altar, acknowledging a gap in their knowledge, and used it as his launching point. What you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you.
Find a positive connection first.
Exactly. That's why these redemptive analogies and eye-openers work. They connect the new message to something the person already knows, and maybe even cherishes, creates automatic interest.
And this isn't just for missionaries far away, is it?
Not at all. The principle applies right here. What does your neighbor cherish? Your colleague, your friend, their family, their job, their hopes. Look for the parallels, the potential eye-openers in their world.
Find those connection points in everyday life.
Yes, and be patient. Trust God for the right moments, the right words.
Wow. This deep dive into communication keys has been, well, really eye-opening itself. It drives home that connection across cultures is so much more than just words.
It really is. It takes deep listening, empathy, sensitivity, finding those bridges within the other person's world.
So the challenge for us maybe is to think about those redemptive analogies or eye-openers in our own circles. What do people around us truly value? How might that connect to deeper truths?
That's a great reflection point.
And maybe a final thought. Just as these diverse cultures held unexpected keys to the gospel, what unknown gods or deep values exist in our own culture, our own communities, that might offer surprising pathways for connection? It encourages us to be students of our own context, too.
A constant learning process.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.